You weren't losing them. You were losing yourself trying to hold on. The more you chased, the more invisible you became. The moment you stop, everything shifts. That's the paradox of attention. When you give too much, they pull away. But when you reclaim your power, suddenly they notice. They wonder. They feel the absence. But this video isn't about them. It's about you. Right now you're standing at a crossroads. One path keeps you stuck in endless waiting, checking your phone, replaying conversations, hoping they'll finally see your worth. The other? It's where freedom begins, where peace takes over, where you stop needing validation from someone who never truly valued you. What if I told you that letting go isn't losing, it's winning? That your silence speaks louder than your words? That when you master emotional detachment, you step into a power you never knew existed. Today we're diving into Stoic philosophy, not as theory, but as action. Real, practical steps to shift the dynamic, to stop chasing, to take your energy back, and to become the kind of woman who no longer begs to be chosen, but chooses herself first. If this resonates with you, share this message with someone who needs it. And tell me in the comments, what's the hardest part of letting go? Let's talk. Let's grow. Let's move forward. 1. Your absence shifts the power of dynamic. They thought you'd always be there, until one day you weren't. At first they didn't notice. They assumed you'd text first, that you'd check in like always, that no matter how little effort they put in, you'd still be there, waiting, hoping, holding on. Then something changed. Silence. No more initiating, no more bending over backward to accommodate them. And suddenly, they felt it. The void. This is the power shift they never saw coming. And it's not because they suddenly love you more. It's because they lost control of the dynamic, the comfort of knowing they had you, no matter what. People take for granted what is freely given. It's human nature. The more accessible something is, the less valuable it seems. Think about a restaurant with no line versus one with a wait list. You want the one that's harder to get into. Your energy works the same way. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This means you can't control how they see you, but you can control what you allow. The moment you remove yourself as an option, you shift from someone chasing love to someone standing in their own power. Imagine this. You met a man who at first seemed interested. He sent good morning texts, made plans, sometimes. But when it really mattered, he was inconsistent. One day he was present, the next he was distant. You noticed it, but instead of walking away, you tried harder. You adjusted your schedule to match his. You excused the missed calls. You accepted the vague responses. And each time you gave more, he gave less. Then one day, you stopped. No more initiating. No more rearranging your life for someone who treated you like an afterthought. At first he didn't notice. Days passed. Then suddenly, a "Hey stranger" text, a like an old picture, a casual check-in. Not because he missed you, but because he missed the validation of knowing you were always there. But this time, you didn't react, because you weren't playing a game, you were simply done. And in that moment he felt it, your absence. It's not about manipulation, it's about value. You don't chase what already belongs to you. The moment you stop explaining your worth, your absence speaks louder than words. If they didn't appreciate you when you were there, they will feel the loss when you're gone. You don't have to prove yourself. The need to constantly explain, fix, and adjust is what kept you stuck. You spent so much time trying to make them see you that you forgot to see yourself. That ends now. Imagine if you focused all the energy you gave to them on yourself. Your growth, your success, your peace. That's what makes you magnetic. When you reclaim your time, when you pour your energy into things that nourish you, the gym, your career, your passions, you no longer feel the urge to wait for them to see your worth. And when that happens, something incredible shifts inside you. You wake up one morning and realize you haven't checked your phone in hours. You don't wonder if they texted. You don't feel that heavy or anxious need to reach out first. You start prioritizing yourself in ways you never did before. You go back to the hobbies you loved before you met them. You rediscover your strength, your focus, your confidence, and that's when they notice. They start wondering what changed, why your energy isn't pouring into them like it used to. And it's not because you're trying to make them chase, it's because you genuinely stopped caring. And That's the most powerful shift of all. You don't have to block them. You don't have to announce your departure. Just quietly step back. If they care, they'll notice. If they don't, that's your answer. Seneca once said, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." This is why you must decide, are you chasing someone who was never meant for you? Or are you ready to choose yourself? You don't have to force anyone to see your value. The right person will never need convincing. The right person will match your energy, not leave you waiting for breadcrumbs. The right person won't make you wonder where you stand. The moment you truly embrace this, you'll never beg for love again. Because deep down, you'll know that you were never meant to chase, only to be cherished. Stay with me. Because next, we'll talk about the moment everything changes once you stop chasing. And trust me, they won't expect what happens next. 2. The moment you stop, everything changes. You've been giving, waiting, hoping, but what if you stopped? It sounds simple, but for so long you've tied your self-worth to someone else's attention. You've made excuses for them. You've justified their inconsistency. You've told yourself maybe they're just busy, when in reality they just weren't prioritizing you. So what happens when you stop chasing? When do you stop over-explaining? When do you stop proving your worth to someone who should have seen it from the start? Everything changes. They start feeling your absence in places they never expected. The lack of your morning check-ins, the silence where your energy used to be, the realization that they no longer have guaranteed access to you. And suddenly, they begin to question everything. It's not because they had an awakening about your value. It's because they lost control. And that's the paradox of detachment. The more you let go, the more power you regain. For so long, you may have feared stepping back, afraid they'd move on, afraid they wouldn't care. But what if I told you that the real transformation doesn't happen with them? It happens with you. Imagine this. You were seeing someone who always kept things vague. When you asked where things were going, he dodged the question. "Let's just see where this goes," he'd say. But whenever he needed something, attention, validation, a pick-me-up, he knew exactly where to find you. At first, you went along with it, believing that if you were patient, he'd eventually commit. So you waited. You stayed available. You made sure he knew you were always there, just in case he decided to be serious about you. But one day, something inside you shifted. You realized that your worth was not a waiting game, that love shouldn't feel like a constant guessing match. That if someone truly valued you, they wouldn't leave you questioning your place in their life. So you stopped. No warning, no long explanation, you just chose yourself instead. At first, he didn't notice. Maybe a day or two passed, and he assumed you'd text him first, like always. But when you didn't, he felt it. The absence of your attention, the void left by your silence. Suddenly, he was checking your social media, responding faster than usual, testing the waters with small messages. Not because he had changed, but because his source of validation had disappeared. And this time, you saw right through it. You didn't rush to reply. You didn't fall for the breadcrumbs, because you had already made the decision to detach. And that decision, that moment of choosing yourself over the illusion of what could be, was the most powerful move you ever made. You see, detachment isn't about playing games, it's about reclaiming your peace. It's about realizing that the right person will never make you feel like you have to fight for a place in their life. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." This is why your power lies in letting go. Because when you stop seeking validation from someone who refuses to give it freely, you take back control of your emotions, your energy, and your sense of self. But here's where the real magic happens. When you stop chasing, you free yourself to attract something better. Your energy shifts. Instead of overextending for someone who gives you half effort, you invest in yourself. You build your confidence, your passions, your inner peace. You stop waiting for someone to choose you, because you finally choose yourself. And when that happens, you become unforgettable. Not because you played hard to get, not because you followed some manipulative dating strategy, but because the moment you stop placing your happiness in someone else's hands, you become a woman who no longer settles. This is why emotional detachment is so powerful. It removes desperation and replaces it with dignity. It shifts the focus from needing someone to see your worth to knowing your worth without external validation. That's what shakes them. That's what makes them wonder. That's what makes them realize they never truly had control in the first place. But this isn't about them. This is about you. So ask yourself, what would your life look like if you took back the energy you wasted waiting for them to care? What would happen if, instead of replaying their words and overanalyzing their actions, you poured that energy into yourself? Because once you do, everything changes. And that's exactly what we'll talk about next. Because when they feel you slipping away, they will try to come back. But this time, you'll know exactly why, and you won't fall for it again. 3. They will try to come back, but it's not love. It always happens. The moment you pull away, the moment you finally choose yourself over waiting for them to change, they feel it. The absence of your energy, the space where your attention used to be, the silence where your love once poured in without conditions, and suddenly they want to reappear. But don't mistake their return for love. It's not love, it's control. They don't miss you. They miss what you gave them. The security of knowing you were always available, always ready, always hoping for them to reciprocate what they were never willing to fully give. At first, they were breadcrumbs. A random text, "Hey, thinking about you." A like on an old post. A vague attempt to test the waters. They want to see if you're still where they left you. If you respond too quickly, they'll feel relieved, reassured that nothing has really changed. And just like that, they slip back into their old patterns, pulling you in just enough to keep you, but never enough to truly commit. You've seen this cycle before, haven't you? You meet a man who seems interested, but only when it's convenient for him, when he's lonely, when his other options aren't available, when he needs validation. But when it comes to consistency, he disappears. Plans get canceled. Texts go unanswered, excuses pile up. The first time it happens, you tell yourself it's just bad timing. The second time, you wonder if you did something wrong. The third time, you start to feel it in your gut. This isn't a coincidence. This is who he is. But because you cared, because you invested, you kept giving him chances. You believed that if you just showed him enough love and enough patience, he'd eventually see your worth. And then one day, something inside you snapped. You woke up and realized you were tired. Tired of the waiting, the guessing, the questioning. Tired of feeling like an afterthought in someone else's story. So you stopped. And that's when he came back. Not because he suddenly realized your value, but because he lost the comfort of knowing you were always there. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Think about that. How many times have you feared losing someone, only to realize they were never fully there to begin with? How many nights have you spent overanalyzing a text, wondering what you could have done differently when the truth is, nothing you did or didn't do would have changed the outcome? Real love isn't about proving yourself. It isn't about tolerating inconsistency, and it definitely isn't about rewarding someone for treating you as an option. So what do you do when they come back? When they suddenly start acting like they care? You observe. Words mean nothing without action. A man who truly values you won't need to test if you're still available. He won't disappear when things get difficult, only to reappear when it's convenient for him. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they regret losing what they took for granted. When he reaches out after weeks, months of silence, pause. Ask yourself, does this person genuinely care about me, or do they just miss the way I made them feel? If his actions don't align with his words, let him go. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with a quiet certainty that you deserve more. This isn't about playing hard to get. It's about knowing you were never meant to be gotten. You were meant to be cherished. The moment you internalize this truth, you free yourself from the cycle. You stop hoping that one day he'll wake up and realize what he lost. You stop needing closure. You stop looking for signs that he's changed. Because deep down you already know, if he truly valued you, he wouldn't have risked losing you in the first place. Once you reach this level of clarity, you'll start to notice something fascinating. The same people who once treated you as an option will suddenly act like they can't live without you. But by then, you won't even care. Because you'll finally understand that the only person you ever needed to choose you was yourself. Now, let's talk about the fear of letting go, and why it's an illusion that's been holding you back for far too long. 4. The fear of letting go is an illusion. You've seen it happen before. They disappear thinking you'll always be there. Then when they sense your absence, they suddenly remember you exist. They come back with sweet words, late-night texts, and carefully crafted excuses. And for a moment you wonder, what if this time is different? What if they finally changed? But deep down, you know the truth. This isn't about love, it's about control. They don't want to lose the comfort of knowing you're still an option. But what about you? Why does the idea of truly letting go scare you more than staying in a cycle of half-hearted love? Because the real battle isn't with them. It's with your own fear of detachment, the fear of being alone, the fear of regret, the fear of the unknown. But here's the truth, that fear isn't real. It's a story you've been telling yourself, and it's time to rewrite it. You once believed that if you loved hard enough, waited long enough, and proved yourself worthy, they would finally see your value. That's why you tolerated mixed signals. That's why you ignored the red flags. That's why you stayed when every instinct told you to walk away. But what if I told you that the real power lies in the very thing you've been avoiding, letting go? Imagine this. You met someone who swept you off your feet at first. He said all the right things, made you feel special, and promised a future that never quite materialized. But when it came to real commitment, he was never fully present. You felt it. The inconsistency, the emotional distance, the feeling that you were investing far more than he was willing to give. So you held on. You convinced yourself that if you just gave it time, if you just understood him better, if you just adjusted your expectations, he would finally come around. But he didn't, because he never had to. Then one night, after waiting for him to return a message that never came, something shifted inside you. You realized you were done. Not angry, not bitter, just done. And that's when the fear hit. The fear of never hearing from him again. The fear of wondering if you made a mistake. The fear of feeling empty without the hope that he might change. But you chose to lean into that discomfort. You didn't beg for closure, you didn't send one last message. You just let go. At first it felt unfamiliar, like stepping into an unknown world. But as the days passed, the weight lifted. You started focusing on yourself again. You reconnected with the things that once brought you joy. And the strangest thing happened, you didn't miss him as much as you thought you would. Because you weren't missing him. You were missing the idea of what he could have been. Epictetus once said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." And the same applies to love. The less you crave validation from someone who isn't willing to truly give, the freer you become. The moment you stop needing their attention to feel worthy, you step into a new kind of power. Letting go isn't losing. It's choosing yourself over someone who never truly chose you. It's reclaiming all the energy you wasted waiting for them to change. It's understanding that your happiness was never meant to depend on someone else's inconsistency. So, what do you do when the fear of letting go grips you? You remind yourself that fear is just a feeling. It comes and it goes. It doesn't define you. You face it by focusing on yourself, not them. You fill the space they once occupied with things that bring you peace, your growth, your passions, your well-being. And most importantly, you trust. Trust that by walking away from what doesn't serve you, you make room for something better. Trust that you are not defined by who stays or who leaves. Trust that by letting go, you are not becoming weaker, you are becoming free. The fear of letting go is an illusion, and once you see through it, you'll never look back. Now, let's talk about what's been keeping you trapped, the illusion of holding on, and why it's been the very thing preventing you from moving forward. 5. The illusion of holding on. You now see the truth. Fear was never the real obstacle. It was the illusion of loss, the belief that walking away meant giving up something valuable. But here's the real question. What exactly are you holding on to? Most of the time, it's not the person, it's the idea of them. It's the fantasy of what they could be if they just changed. If they just saw your worth, if they just put in the effort you've been waiting for. But the reality is different. If someone truly wanted you, you wouldn't have to keep proving yourself. If love was real, it wouldn't require you to sacrifice your self-respect. So why do we hold on so tightly? Because we've been conditioned to believe that letting go means failure, that it means we didn't try hard enough, that maybe if we held on a little longer, things would finally shift in our favor. But let's be honest, how has holding on served you? Has it brought you peace? Has it made you feel cherished? Or has it drained you? Left you overthinking, questioning your worth, and shrinking yourself just to keep someone who was never truly yours? Holding on is often driven by hope, but hope without action is a slow form of self-betrayal. It keeps you in a cycle of waiting for them to change, waiting for things to get better, waiting for the version of them that only exists in your mind. Imagine this. You're dating someone who is inconsistent. He's affectionate when it suits him, but distant when you need him most. He calls when he wants to, but when you try to make plans, he suddenly becomes busy. He keeps you just close enough to give you hope, but never fully commits. At first, you tell yourself to be patient. You justify his behavior, thinking maybe he just needs time. So you adjust. You lower your expectations. You stop bringing up your needs because you don't want to push him away. But deep down, you feel it. The sinking feeling in your stomach when he ignores your message. The quiet ache in your chest when you see him giving attention to others but making excuses for you. The loneliness of being in something that never quite feels like enough. And then one day, you wake up and ask yourself, is this really what I deserve? The answer is no. Because love isn't about waiting for someone to choose you. Love is about two people who already know they want to be there. It's about mutual effort, respect, and emotional security, not this endless cycle of proving, waiting, and hoping. Epictetus once said, "The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best." And here's the truth you need to hear. Holding on to someone who doesn't truly value you isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment. But how do you let go when everything in you wants to hold on? First, shift your focus. Instead of obsessing over what you're losing, start thinking about what you're gaining. Peace, clarity, self-respect. When you walk away from someone who never truly saw you, you open space for something better. Second, stop romanticizing potential. People don't change unless they want to. If he wanted to be consistent, he would be. If he valued you, he wouldn't risk losing you. No amount of love, patience, or sacrifice on your end will force someone to grow if they're not ready. Third, create emotional distance. This means cutting off the small habits that keep you emotionally tied, checking his social media, rereading old messages, and waiting for him to notice your absence. Emotional detachment isn't about anger or resentment. It's about reclaiming your energy and directing it towards something that serves you. And fourth, remind yourself, letting go isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself. It's recognizing that real love doesn't require you to abandon your needs, that you are already enough exactly as you are, without having to beg for someone to see it. Because here's the truth that will set you free. When you finally stop chasing, when you stop holding on to someone who isn't holding on to you, that's when your power returns. That's when you realize that the person you were waiting for was never them. It was you. The moment you stop clinging to what doesn't serve you, you make space for what truly will. And when you fully embrace this, you'll start to feel a kind of peace that no relationship could ever give you, because it comes from within. Now that you've broken the illusion, let's talk about the real shift, how letting go actually gives you back your power. 6. Learn to self-validate. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. Seneca. Validation is the same. If you constantly crave approval, no amount will ever be enough. You'll always need the next compliment, the next reassurance, the next external sign that you are worthy. But the moment that validation disappears, your confidence crumbles. Because deep down, it was never truly yours to begin with. I used to chase validation. I needed someone to tell me I was doing well. That was enough, that I was worthy. And for a brief moment, it worked. I felt seen. I felt important. But the problem with external validation is that it's fleeting. The moment it's gone, you're left empty, searching for the next fix. If your confidence depends on someone else's approval, it will always be fragile. Because people are inconsistent. One day they praise you, the next they don't notice you. If your self-worth is tied to that, then you will constantly be at the mercy of other people's opinions. So how do you break free? How do you build confidence that doesn't shatter the moment someone withdraws their validation? The answer is self-validation. Learning to affirm your own worth before anyone else does. At its core, self-validation is about trust. Trusting that your achievements matter even if no one claps for you. Trusting that your progress is real, even if no one acknowledges it. Trusting that your voice deserves to be heard, even if no one echoes it back. The Stoics believed in this deeply. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He understood that relying on anything external, whether it be fortune, recognition, or approval, would always leave you vulnerable. True strength comes from within. So how do you start validating yourself? First, recognize where you're seeking approval. Ask yourself, who am I waiting for permission from? Whose validation do I crave? The first step to breaking free is identifying where you're trapped. Second, affirm yourself the way you wish others would. If you constantly wish people would acknowledge your growth, start acknowledging it yourself. If you wish someone would tell you that you're enough, start telling yourself. Not in an empty, feel-good way, but in a way rooted in truth. Remind yourself of your resilience, your effort, and the things you've overcome. Third, detach from the need to be seen. This is the hardest part. The world conditions us to seek recognition. But true self-assurance means doing the work for yourself, not for applause. It means knowing your value even when no one is watching. I once worked tirelessly on something expecting acknowledgement, but when it came, it was brief. A simple "good job," and then it was over. The moment was gone, and I felt empty again. That's when I realized the validation I was chasing wasn't what I actually needed. What I needed was to believe in myself, regardless of recognition. If you rely on the world to make you feel valuable, you give the world the power to take that value away. But if you learn to validate yourself, no one can strip you of your confidence. So ask yourself, if no one ever praised me again, would I still believe in my worth? If the answer is no, it's time to shift. Because real confidence isn't about being seen, it's about seeing yourself. 7. Build an identity beyond just one thing. Confidence is strongest when it is spread across different areas of your life. If your entire sense of worth is tied to just one thing, a relationship, a job, a talent, then the moment that one thing is shaken, your self-esteem collapses with it. Many people build their identity around a single role. They define themselves as the successful professional, the perfect partner, or the attractive one. But what happens when that job is lost? When does that relationship end? When time changes the way they look? If your identity is built on only one pillar, you will always feel unstable. The strongest sense of self comes from diversification. Just like a well-balanced investment portfolio, a well-balanced identity is resistant to setbacks. It isn't fragile. It isn't dependent on one outcome. It stands firm because it is rooted in many things, not just one. This is why it's dangerous to rely on external labels to define you. If you base your entire self-worth on being admired, what happens when admiration fades? If your confidence comes from being in a relationship, what happens if that relationship ends? If your sense of identity is built solely on success, how will you feel when you inevitably face failure? To build an identity that lasts, you must invest in multiple parts of yourself. First, develop skills that make you feel capable. Confidence isn't just about appearance or social status. It's about competence. Learn something new. Try something different. Whether it's a creative skill, a fitness goal, or an intellectual challenge, every new skill you build strengthens your identity and reminds you that you are more than just one thing. Second, nurture relationships that exist beyond one role. Be more than just someone's partner. Be more than just a colleague or a parent. Build friendships, communities, and connections that see you as a whole person, not just one version of you. The broader your social identity, the less any one loss will shake you. Third, embrace change instead of fearing it. If your identity is too rigid, any shift will feel like a crisis. But if you build a sense of self that allows for growth, you won't see change as a threat. You'll see it as an expansion. The person you are today is different from who you were 5 years ago, and that's not a failure. That's proof of evolution. Many people experience deep insecurity not because they lack value, but because they've placed all their value into one fragile thing. They tell themselves, if I lose this, I lose myself. But you are not just one role. You are not just one achievement. You are a collection of experiences, strengths, and possibilities. Confidence that lasts isn't built on something temporary. It's built on knowing that no matter what changes, you will always have something solid to stand on. So instead of asking, who am I if I lose this? Start asking, what else can I become? Because the more you invest in different parts of yourself, the stronger, more resilient, and more confident you will be. 8. Your worth was never theirs to see. You've cut ties. You've redirected your focus. You've stopped replaying old memories, stopped waiting for closure that was never coming. And now, standing in this new chapter of your life, something inside you shifts. You no longer need their validation, because for the first time in a long time, you realize you were never the problem. The issue was never your effort, your kindness, or your love. The issue was giving your worth to someone who was never capable of seeing it. But here's the truth. Your worth was never theirs to recognize. It was always yours to claim. And the moment you internalize that, you step into a version of yourself that is untouchable. Imagine this. You were with someone who always made you feel like you were asking for too much. When you needed reassurance, he called you needy. When you expressed your feelings, he told you you were overthinking. When you pulled away, he suddenly became interested again. Just enough to keep you hooked, but never enough to make you feel safe. At first, you blamed yourself. Maybe you were too emotional. Maybe you did expect too much. Maybe if you just lowered your standards a little more, he'd finally be the man you needed. But then you started to notice something. It wasn't that you were too much, it was that he was too little. And the moment you realized that, The moment you stopped seeing yourself as someone who needed to be chosen and started seeing yourself as someone who chooses, everything changed. Marcus Aurelius once said, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." So now ask yourself, where have you been placing your ambition? Was it in trying to be enough for someone? Or is it time to start pouring that ambition into yourself? Because something incredible happens when you shift your focus inward. You stop wondering if you are lovable and you start becoming the kind of person who knows she is. You stop hoping for their recognition and you start recognizing yourself. And the more you do this, the less you care about whether they ever saw your worth, because in the end, it was never their job to see it. And the irony? The moment you step into this version of yourself, the version who is self-assured, unattached, and completely focused on her own elevation, is the moment they start noticing. But by then it won't matter. Because when you truly understand your worth, you stop needing anyone else to confirm it. And that's the kind of energy that commands attention without ever having to ask for it. Now, as we reach the end, there's one last thing I want you to do. Make a declaration. Not to them, not to the past, but to yourself. Letting go is not about loss, it's about freedom. It's about choosing peace over chaos, self-respect over desperation, and clarity over false hope. When you detach from those who fail to see your worth, you step into a power that is entirely your own. You've learned that your absence shifts the dynamic, that the moment you stop chasing, everything changes. You've seen how they will try to return, not out of love, but out of habit, out of the loss of control. You now understand that fear of letting go is just an illusion, one that kept you stuck far longer than you should have been. And most importantly, you've realized that your worth was never theirs to see. It was always yours to claim. But knowing this isn't enough. You have to live it. This is your practice now: emotional detachment, self-respect, and unwavering standards. Each time you feel the urge to reach out, redirect that energy back into yourself. Every time you start romanticizing the past, remind yourself of the reality that led you here. And every single day, make the conscious decision to walk in your worth. Because the moment you fully embody this lesson, everything changes. Not just in love, but in life. You'll find that the more you value yourself, the more you attract people who value you without conditions. Now I want to hear from you. What's the hardest part of letting go? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.